Here we go.
Tell me what to do to make all my Lunker Lake dreams come true.
Hello, everybody. Bob Lusk, the Pond Boss. It must be Wednesday. Looks like we got at least one viewer. I love that. Let's step it up. Here we go. We're going to have a lively hour talking about all kinds of things about ponds and lakes and fish and plants and all that sort of thing. Looks like Chris Arthur is here. Good to see Chris. James Allen. Hi, James. Good to see you, buddy. Glad to see our regulars checking in. It's pretty funny. I was over near Longview, Texas at I guess December 30th, hanging out with Chris Horsley, who watches this show a lot. I see Steven Stupa. Happy New Year to you guys as well. Kendall Brown, good to see you. Anyway, I was hanging out with Chris Horsley and looking at a lake site for one of his running buddies over there, Britton Plemons, who has seen some of these videos. Hey, Wayne and Josie, good to see you guys. Frank James from Louisiana. I wasn't too far from you the other day, Frank. Chris Horsley got a running buddy that's over there from Longview, who's a physician over there. He and his bride have bought some land, and they're looking at putting a 6-acre lake. They're going to use your contractor. So that's pretty cool. But anyway, we got to sit down and talk about that. I see Christopher Aguilar. Hey, I was actually supposed to be broadcasting tonight, right now, from Ron Ardoin's Cabone, but we canceled it today. I was about an hour plus into my drive headed to Louisiana this morning when I got a call from the electrofishing folks, and he had come down with COVID. We tested positive this morning, so he was going to go to the doctor and set up his treatment protocol. And then I see R.E. Thompson, son COVID, New Year's, and with you, so no quarantine, not all celebrate recovery. Not at, son had COVID, New Year's, as he was with us. So, you're quarantined and you're not able to be at celebrate recovery. Okay, I got that now. Wow, okay. Well, I hate that that's happened, but I'm glad that you're here. Well, anyway, going back to that, supposed to hang out with Christopher Aguilar and 2 or 3 other folks that watch this show and take Pond Boss. So I'm disappointed we didn't get to do that, but I think we made the smart call to not come because there was an outside chance, and really probably a realistic chance, that some of us could have been exposed to that Omicron virus. So glad we're not there, but we are going to change that up and go do it. Once we do that, I'll let you guys know. Of course, that was my wife beeping in just then, and I guess she forgot that it's Wednesday and I do a broadcast. Steve Thorburn, hope everyone is great. Getting cold in north central Kansas. Yeah, you got a little Arctic front blowing through you right now. Anyway, up near Hallsville, went to look at this site, and it's going to be a lake. Looks to me like it's going to be shaped like a molar with the roots flared out. So it was really interesting to go meet Britton Plemons and his wife Ashley and their dad, or his dad Royce, and Chris Horsley, and hang out with those guys for a few hours and start looking. But here's what I told them. That they're happy with the contractor, which is a good contractor. He's the same one that built Frank's Lake just 5 miles from there. Frank, I didn't realize I was so close to them or so close to you, or I would have rang your number. I kind of put that together in a short notice. John Funk, let's see here. I'm going to catch up with you guys right now. Kendall Brown, good to see you. Steve Thorburn said hello. Mike Cottrell, Chunk Anzalone, Danny Mack, Bill Russell, Happy New Year. Latham, I wasn't too far from you. I was near Hallsville on the 30th. You put a 2-stall boathouse on your lake. Couldn't be happier. We went to Hallsville and didn't call. Yes, I did. I went to Hallsville, and I had another appointment right after that. Actually, no, wait, that's not right. I went to Mount Pleasant and looked at a small pond there behind the man's house, and then from there I headed to Hallsville. Then I had to get back because I had a dinner date that night with my wife. So I didn't have a whole lot of room to do a lot of things, so I kind of stuffed that into a fast-paced 500-mile run around that day. But it's well worth it because I was able to take a look and just, spend a little bit of windshield time and give things some thought. So now I'm like George Thorogood. I drink alone. Well, cheers to that. Here's my first sip. Pretty good. Frank, if we can be of any help to them, you know what? I think I will share your number if that's okay. That would be good. Hey, Michael Gray checking in from Tennessee. So anyway, we were going to go down to Lake Charles today and then electrofish about a 100-acre lake east of Lake Charles tomorrow. Weather would have been perfect. Wish we could have done it. Glad we didn't. There were so many red flags coming up, mostly just the logistics and the way things were coming together, COVID and 2 or 3 breaths during the discussion this morning. So I think we made a smart decision not to come down there. But I also know that we're going to be able to reschedule it and go do it again or go set it up and do it, not long from now, I got a feeling. Charlie Kaplinger, good to see you. So anyway, as I was thinking about what to talk about today, Ron sent me some pictures of some bluegills today. And they were covered with sores on them. And one of the things I don't talk much about are fish diseases because they're relatively rare. Now, I'll say that out of one side of my mouth and say out of the other one that I see too many cases of fish diseases through the course of the year. Now, the problem, like what Ron's question to me was, what do we need to do? Hey, there's Travis. Good to see Travis. I think Travis is still probably hanging out in Mexico. Let's see who's that above him. Brandon LaFleur. Good to see you guys. There's Ron Ardway. I'm talking about you, Ron. Josiah Town from Clinton, Missouri. What's your thoughts on stocking yellow perch in small Missouri ponds? You know what? I'll tackle that here in a minute because I do have some thoughts about that. But anyway, Ron sent me some pictures. And it won't be long before I figure out these videos, how I can bring pictures on the screen. Now I'm sitting here in my home. Right over there is going to be my studio and office. And I'm going to set it up where I can have a TV in the background, where I can use my laptop or another laptop to post up photographs and videos and things like that. I'm going to figure out how to do this better. And another thing I'm going to tell you is I'm really thinking about, I want to put together some audio podcasts, but I also want to video some of those podcasts, especially when I have a guest, and do it along a parallel line to what Joe Rogan does, except less profanity and a shorter time span. Nobody wants to watch a fish guy for 3 hours, So, hey, Jason Niss, good to see you, brother. Good to see you. Yeah, gig 'em, man. Hey, R.C. Slocum was declared cancer-free today, buddy. That's a good deal. The family is well. Actually, Debbie just headed out. She went down to Buda to hang out with grandkids down there. So I'm here by myself, hanging out, doing this with you guys. So now I want to circle back and get some coherent thoughts put together for you guys. Ron's fish, they were covered with lesions on the side, dorsal fin, and under the belly of the fish. Now, the one he showed me was probably one of the worst ones that he's got. Hi, Wesley Ellis. Good to see you, buddy. And so as I look at them, they're bacteria. But 99 times out of 100, actually, I'm going to tell you, even maybe a little higher percentage than that, the bacterial infection is not the problem. It's just like if your 90-year-old granddad or great-granddad, as young as some of you are, were to decide tomorrow in Kansas, where he lives, to go get the mail. So he tromps in 20-degree weather or colder, a quarter of a mile down the driveway to the mailbox, gets the mail, and comes back, and Grandma figures out that he went down there in his skivvies. About 4 or 5 days later, he's got a drippy nose. A couple days after that, his lungs are congested. He starts to deteriorate. He gets pneumonia, which is a bacterial infection. And then he's gone. What took him out? The bacterial infection? The runny nose? No, the trip to the mailbox. So with most fish diseases, yeah, look at there, Travis. Jimmy Houston's wife is starting to walk. And one of the things about her, she is very, very, I've spent a fair amount of time with her, and she is really, really headstrong, and she's competitive. She's very quietly competitive. I mean, she used to win fishing tournaments, you know, when she was actively fishing back in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s. So, yeah. So, anyway, there's got to be something that's triggering those lesions on Ron's fish. Well, Purina Mills has got a veterinarian on staff that I'm pretty sure used to work at the San Diego Zoo, and she also worked with fish. So she's got some good tools in her lab there at Gray Summit at the Purina Farm. So I tagged up with them today with an email to see if we could send a fish. Because here's what you got to think about. You know, what are you going to do about it? Ron was saying, well, hey, maybe I need to switch feeds. Maybe I need to go from Purina to Optimal. And then he said, but I don't know, maybe it's water quality. You know, his question was, if I switch feeds, will it make a difference? Well, Grandpa that went down to the mailbox, he could switch his feed and it wouldn't have made any difference because it was the walk to the mailbox. You know, and so where I'm going with this is most of the time there's some stressor, whether it's water quality is deteriorated or it's the fish are overcrowded, which we know Ron's fish are overcrowded. Those bluegill are in there really, really dense, and he's in a pond that doesn't go through a winter. You know, it goes through summer, sort of summer. You know, so his water temperatures don't drop enough to make any fish slow down, even sort of want to go dormant. It just doesn't happen. So they're actively growing all the time, and they're reproducing all the time. You know, and so could it be that they're too crowded? Could it be, you know, so the question as I sent it to the Purina Mills team was, if we want to sample these fish, we can send them. Ron can send them, which I don't know if they want to do that or not. They haven't responded to my email yet. So we'll see. And if I see something functional there, I'll pass that on to you guys. But the question that I'm asking is, could this be environmental? Could it be water quality degrading? Is it because there's too many fish, or there's not enough exchange of water, or there's a buildup of nutrients, overfeeding the fish? You know, is it something environmental? If not, then could it be something that's inherent and innate to those fish? So in other words, do those fish have a genetic trait that when they finally get to some point, you know, which typically is geriatric, do they just break out in some sort of internal issues that then turn into bacterial lesions, you know? Now, could it be that the feed is not nutritionally full enough and that's all they eat? You know, I don't know. I can't imagine it being fish food. I could see that some of the bigger fish that gorge themselves on that fish food, if they're not feeding in the natural food chain, which I haven't met a bluegill yet that doesn't feed in the natural food chain, but if the competition is so high that natural food chain is depleted because of competition, because of crowding, then I could see something like that. So is there something that's missing for them nutritionally? I don't know. I see Bear Brundrett. Good to see you. Hey, R.C. Slocum was declared cancer-free today, buddy. I saw that about 30 minutes ago. That's super. Drew Schmidt, did the mailman swap my November, December Pond Boss? Not sure when they were. Hey, the November, December Pond Boss was mailed in early October, I believe. That you should have gotten it by now. The January, February was mailed December the 23rd. So, you know, it's kind of crazy the way the post office works. If you haven't gotten your November, December, send an email to info@pondboss.com. Let Leanne know, and she'll put one in the mail to you. So the other questions about those diseased fish is was there some sort of a stressor that caused it? Now, Ron sent me pictures of some of those fish probably 3 or 4 months ago, and I recommended that he medicate the feed. Now, I'm going to say this publicly again, when you medicate feed to feed the fish to treat a bacterial infection from the inside out, you want to mix the medication like I've talked about before, mix it into the feed the fish, feed it to them for 10 to 14 days. You know, like when you have a bacterial infection, you get an antibiotic from your physician. He prescribes that antibiotic for 10 to 14 days, depending on what it is, what your what your condition is and which antibiotic that he chooses. And if you take that antibiotic for 3 or 4 days, you feel better and you quit, you're going to have a relapse. You're going to get it again. But if you take it through the course of the prescription, then you're going to be fine. It's going to do what it does. But then you stop taking it, because if you keep taking an antibiotic, then it's going to rearrange your gut health. It's going to change your microbial, populations in your digestive system, and any bacteria that can mutate or form that can be resistant to that antibiotic renders that antibiotic no good anymore. Well, I didn't get that message to Ron. I don't know what I did, but I didn't convey that to him well enough. He kept feeding medicated feed all the way up for about 4 months. And still, he's got these bacterial lesions popping up on these fish. So we're going to try to figure out what's going on with those fish. And once we can get an answer, then we can come up with a potential solution. So rather than just run off and say, yeah, let's switch feeds. Well, that's like when somebody's telling me that when I get a call and somebody says, I've got moss and I treated it with copper sulfate and it's resistant to it. Okay, well, what kind of vegetation do you have? Well, it's moss. And I bought copper sulfate or an algicide and I treated it. It didn't kill it. It made it worse. Send me a picture. So get a photograph of coontail. Copper sulfate doesn't kill coontail. So they misidentified the problem, came up with the wrong solution, got no results, spent the money, and it was wasted. So that's kind of where we are on that situation. On the trip over to Hallsville last week, it was the very first trip to begin to teach the Plemons family the different things they need to think about when they're going through the process of building this new lake. So job one is you got to have the right kind of dirt, and you have to have a supply of water. Well, they've got that. So the contractor came, dug some test holes, found plenty of clay. He's content with that there's enough clay to build a good dam. Measured the watershed. It's plenty big. It's about 10 or 12 acres of watershed per acre of lake. That's good. They've got a good idea on how the dam spillway is going to be built and the overflow pipe. They're going to talk about that. And then it's a matter of where's all the clay come from to build the dam. And then the next thing I told them is it's time to flag the shoreline. So they staked the shoreline at 2 or 3 spots, but they need to go around the entire perimeter of that lake and flag or stake the shoreline so they can begin to visualize that horizontal plane that's going to be their lake. Now, one thing interesting about their site, it looks like every tree they've got in that watershed is going to be flooded. At a certain level, the trees are gone because it's mostly 2 or 3 creeks that merge, and all the trees are growing on the creek bank or down in the creek. So they have very few trees outside the creek bank, which what that means is they're going to be losing a lot of trees. So they got to look at that and decide, do we want to lose that many trees, or do we want to flood some of this shallow area and lose more trees? So the next decision they're going to have to make is going to be based on where the water lines are going to be. So that's going to be what they're going to do next, is flag the shoreline. So now then, let's go back up here. I'm going to tackle some of these questions that are popping in. Let's see here. Holy cow. All right, Josiah from Clinton, Missouri. What's your thoughts on stocking yellow perch in small Missouri ponds? I'm not opposed to that. Actually, I kind of like yellow perch. I don't know that I would, if you've got 5 or 6 ponds, I wouldn't put yellow perch in all of them. Now, the question I would ask you first is, why do you want yellow perch? If you want yellow perch to be a fish that you eat, maybe so, maybe no. They're actually a predator fish that can be converted to fish food. So you can grow more pounds per unit of water if they're on fish food than if they're depending on eating natural food. Now, here's the kind of the catch-22 with yellow perch, is where they can spawn, they spawn well. They spawn first before any other warm water fish. Yellow perch are cool water fish, but I've found them in as far south as North Texas, and so, but they don't get very big where the climate isn't suitable. In Missouri, the climate would be suitable. So as long as you got the right kind of habitat, you have enough predators that can control the yellow perch reproduction, then it could be a good idea. If you're using them for forage fish for overcrowded bass, that's a good idea. because they're tubular shaped. They make pretty good forage fish for bass. The thing that you got to recognize is you got to spend a little bit of time culling to make sure that you got the right size bass eating the right sizes of yellow perch based on how well they do. So I like stocking yellow perch as long as you've got a good idea as to why, and you have the support or habitat to support them. Okay, now let me see here. I'm going to scroll down just a little bit while I'm doing that. Hey, Pond Boss Magazine, $35 a year. There it is right here. $35 a year. Cheaper than a Friday night date. And this lasts a year. Friday at midnight, that date's over. And any semblance of supper is gone the next day. This lasts for a year and is full of nuggets. By the way, see, somebody told me, what was it? Something besides click like. I got to learn about that. Instead of clicking like, click the heart. That's what they told me. Click the heart. Somebody tell me that again. I forgot. Click the heart, the love button. Hashtag Pond Boss Magazine in the comments section and share this to your timeline, and you're eligible for a drawing for a Pond Boss hat. I gave away my last one last week. Haven't been to the office. And a Pond Boss mug. I've got my found one in my truck. Say it with me. It knows how to keep hot things hot and cold things cold. We don't know how it knows, but it knows to do that. So, anyway, and you know, it's almost 7 o'clock already. Good gosh, where'd that go? All right, so James Allen says, when I tagged your site, I didn't realize my wife saw my show posts on her account. Had I known that, I would have posted. Sure wish my wife would buy me Beyond the Basics. Hey, that book is coming along. I got to preview it today. Mark McDonald, the founding editor of Pond Boss Magazine, is going to write the foreword. He and I had a lengthy conversation today. I'm excited that he's going to be involved with it. But our mission is to see if we can't have that thing ready to go by March the 1st. We're not far. Everything in it has been done. The corrections have been sent. Waiting on the foreword from Mark. I just hope it's not as long as the book. And, you know, it's got 7 chapters. It's got, what do you call it, on the back with all the definitions. It's got one of those. And the front cover's designed. The back cover's not. We're working on that. And I thought it was going to be more pages, so I've got pages to add more photographs. So we're going to add a montage of photographs in the middle of it. I think we're going to put it in the middle of it. So that's very cool. And it's only going to be like $29.95. And it's kind of funny. I was talking to Debbie the other day and kind of teasing with her a little bit. And I said, hey, honey, what's it like sleeping with an author? She smiled. She says, you know, it's pretty good. What's it like selling everything you know for $30? Ouch. And then she smiled really big. So, let's see here. There's like a million in there. Yeah, talking about Ron's Pond. Okay, Mike McPherson. I think we've had this conversation before. I've had about 5 bluegill in the last 2 weeks, dead and floating. They were all covered with what looks like algae, so I assume they were dead for a while, but just finally floated up. No marks or damage whatsoever. All right, now, you know, a while ago when I was talking about the trip to the mailbox, let's just carry that further. With the fish, when the fish get distressed, and it can be, I'll tell you what can stress a fish that's happened this year. Mike, I don't remember where you are, but I know in Texas that we had warm weather, then the temperature plummeted. Then it actually got hot. We had several days where the temperature got up to 85 degrees, didn't get down below about 65 degrees. You know, and so that was enough to make the water temperature go up 15 or 18 degrees in some of these ponds. So what happens is when the temperature rises, falls, rises, and then plummets again, that can be a stressor that can trigger a bacterial infection in some of these fish that are not as strong. You know, now what happens with that algae growing on them, that is called, listen to this, here's a big word, Saprolegnia. That's a fungus. So what happens, like if Ron's fish, if he lived in northern Louisiana or, you know, North Texas, Arkansas through there, and he had that bacterial infection, what happens is in warm water, those infections can heal. And they can heal fairly quickly given the right impetus, you know, like a bacteria or get rid of the stressors or, you know, good nutritious food food, whatever could cause them to heal. But when the water's cold, it delays that healing process and allows that fungus to begin to grow on those lesions. So odds are high that on those bluegill that were covered with that algae, that was actually a fungus, which is the third thing that happened. The first thing was the stressor. The second thing was a bacterial infection. Then it was hit by the fungus. And once a fish has fungus on it, odds are it ain't going to come back. Now, there are some things you can do with fish that have bacterial infections. You can actually dip them in water with salt. I was telling Ron about that today. I didn't have time to look up the quantity, but you can take a 5-gallon bucket, add pond water, add salt. Now, I don't remember the amount. I'm thinking it's like half a pound to a pound of salt. Dip them in that salt for 30 seconds and then put them back in the pond. You can also use potassium permanganate, which will help kill the bacteria and prevent that fungus from growing on them. Now, you better know what you're doing if you're going to use that stuff. I'm not even sure if it's... I think you can actually buy it in pet stores where they sell fish. So, here we go. Okay, so let's see here. Kevin, I tried to get a renewable sub on Palmos, hashtag Palmos Magazine. Said I did not have an account. Okay, when you go to the store, the palmboss.com store, you make a purchase. I think it asks you to set up an account so we can have your address and then you pay for it with a credit card. Although the credit card number is hidden from us unless you give permission to use it in renewals. So you do have to have an account. Now, I don't know how that works, but if you can't figure it out, call the office and talk to Leanne about it. She knows everything about that stuff, and I don't. I try to know about fish and ponds and stuff. So Jeff Thompson, Happy New Year. I see down there, Kevin says we got 2 inches of ice on our pond. Is your ice clear? Because I'm noticing that it seems like this year, the ponds I've seen that have ice, it's starting off, the ice is clearer this year than normal. You know, some years it's cloudy. You know, in cloudy ice, you don't have any photosynthesis. Clear ice without snow on top of it, you know, that's a good thing. So Jeff says, Happy New Year. When you're renovating a 2-acre existing pond and you have your own forage hatchery ponds, at what point is an overkill with having too many bluegill or forage fish in there for trophy bass? Really, the overkill with having too many bluegill is if you have too many adult bluegills that are nest raiders and stopping recruitment. So if the bluegills are so dense in there that your bass can't eat them, and they disrupt spawning of all species, that's when they're too heavy. I've seen that twice in 40 years. If you're managing a truly trophy bass lake and you think you're getting to the point that you're growing too many bluegills, change. Take one of those hatchery ponds, and I'm presuming, if I remember right, the hatchery ponds that you've told me about, either you built them or you're getting ready to, I don't remember, but you can't imagine how many emails and texts and stuff I get looking at hatchery ponds and fish and stuff. I don't remember all of them, but if you can drain those ponds and refill them, then one thing you can do is you can buy like some feed-trained F1 tiger bass at 4 inches, you grow them up to 10 inches, take the best of the best, put those in your trophy bass lake. Or you can grow tilapia. Let's see, and I think, Jeff, I think you're in North Carolina. I don't remember if tilapia are legal there or not. I don't remember. Or you can grow threadfin shad. You know, you can change the species of fish. You can grow fathead minnows. You know, so you can change up. That's part of your management strategy, is to decide how best to use those hatchery ponds based on what your main lake needs. Travis says, misidentify paying the dumb tax. And you still haven't gotten your magazine. Okay, I will not remember that in the morning. So if you would, send me an email. If you send it to info@palmboss.com, Leanne's going to see it. She's the one that's going to do something about it. And we have had issues with the post office. It's the only business I've seen that tells you they're going to slow down their service. They're not always going to be competent. Then they raise their prices. Try that in the private sector. Okay, Harrison Davis. Christopher Aguilar Dunn. Harrison, I hate to tell you, but I told you so. Go Bulldogs. Well, let's see what happens. It ought to be a fun game. SEC. Frank James. He loves feeding his fish. And haven't noticed that it changes the flavor, but I don't eat enough of them to know. What is your experience with feeding and fish flavor? Well, I'll tell you this. The flavor of fish is more affected by the water quality than it is the fish food. If you're feeding a good, healthy fish food, the worst thing I've seen happen is like feeding a whole lot of grain-based fish food to catfish, for example. They store a lot of that as fat. So you wind up with catfish that have a lot of fat. If you're feeding it to bluegill, if you're feeding Aquamax 600 or MVP or any of the Aquamax high protein level fish foods, and you're feeding those to the all the different species, that's going to help the flavor be better. Now, what you don't know sometimes is the texture. Like if you let a catfish live to 7 or 8 pounds, even though it's been fed well, its texture is not going to be that good. It's going to be grainy. Sometimes that flesh is mushy, so the flavor is not necessarily adversely affected by fish food, but it is affected by water quality. If you catch a fish out of a pond with a heavy plankton bloom, it's going to taste musty. If you catch one with blue-green algae, it's going to have kind of an oily smell and kind of a musty smell to it. So off flavor typically comes from the quality of water that those fish are living in. $29.95, cheaper than a Friday night date or a Saturday night date. That's right. Yeah, so Travis is, he's kind of throwing it out there. Need to see it happen on January the 10th. Yep. I wasn't going to say that. Best time to add Aglem in a South Louisiana pond. Now. Right now, from now until mid-March. That's the best time. That's when Aglem, now listen to me, Aglem. Had a guy, I can't remember who it was, I was talking to somebody last week. Actually, it was face-to-face. Can't remember who it was. Oh, I know who it was. It was Chris Horsley talking about putting some lime in his pond over there in East Texas. And when I asked him what kind of lime was it, he said, well, it was lime. So where I want to go with that is there's a lot of different kinds of lime. There's quick lime, hydrated lime. There is, hydrated lime is calcium hydroxide. You want dolomitic lime, which is calcium carbonate. Because if you use, the hydrated lime or any of the other limes like they use on highways, you're going to add calcium to the water, but you're also going to send your pH up and your alkalinity is going to stay flat, stay low, and you're going to not improve the pond's ability to buffer itself, which that's a big deal. You want alkalinity above 40 parts per million, preferably up over 100. If you get 130 or 140, that's perfect. Now, if alkalinity shoots up to 300, now you're going to have a hard time if you want to fertilize that thing, because that fertilization, the phosphorus is going to be bound with the calcium. So it's kind of hard to pull that off. The phosphorus will bind with the carbonate and the phosphate. The rest of it's going to bind with the calcium. So you're going to end up with a cloudy pond that's white and isn't going to grow the plankton. So you want calcium carbonate lime. That's what you want. I'm going to take a stop for a minute and just thank the sponsors. Thank Pure in the Mills. They sponsor this show every Wednesday, and I appreciate that. Not only do I appreciate that, I can't wait to hear their response back. I texted both of them, sent one email to Dr. Kimbra Marshall. She's the veterinarian, and Dr. Michael Schlegel, who's the nutritionist. So my questions to them are, could this be something that's nutritional, or do you have any other ideas? And Kimbra, would you like to have some fish, to culture in the lab so you can find out, is it Aeromonas, columnaris, something else, and figure out what it could be. And if that's the case, here we go. We'll figure it out. So Pure in the Mills, I love their research farm. I've spent a lot of time there, and I like the fact that they're always spending time and resources to come up with better products. That's one of my favorite things. And then getting it out for us, I warmed up to them back in 1995 when they looked me in the eye and said, hey, We see your industry as one that's going to burgeon and grow and become significant. We'd like to create products to help in your niche. And so from that point on, that's part of what they've done, is they've created products for this sport fish niche. And I appreciate that. Also appreciate Texas Hunter, Chris Blood. And I don't see Chris on here tonight. He's usually here. But one of the things Chris always tells me is promote yourself. Well, I'm going to promote Texas Hunter feeders first. I think Texas Hunter feeders are the best feeders on the market out there, bar none. There's some great feeders. There's a number of really, really good feeders. What really sets Texas Hunter apart to me is not only are their products dependable and fairly priced. Now, they're not cheap. You can go to a box store and buy a moultrie for $200, but you're going to be replacing batteries. You're going to be changing timers. And I'm not saying that things don't go wrong with the Texas Hunter feeder from time to time, because they do. It's a machine. But their customer service is top notch. You know, when you got an issue, you just let them know. They're going to fix it. Whatever it takes, they're going to fix it. And I've seen them do that over and over and over. And I appreciate that. David Schneiderman, Easy Docks of Texas. He's a sponsor as well, and we appreciate him. I got a press release that Leanne, if she hasn't put it on Facebook yet, she will tomorrow. But this is pretty interesting in our business. Outdoor Water Solutions, John Redd, they're based in Springdale, Arkansas, just acquired Aerolator, which produces aeration products in both the pond and wastewater industry. So they're going to combine those two companies and expand the product line. Press release is going out. I got it yesterday. Send it to Leanne. She'll get it up on our page. You can see that. Outdoor Water Solutions wants to be a sponsor for this show as well. So we're talking football, looks like. Yep, it will be kind of fun to watch that football game. We only got 5 more days. Here we go. Okay, Travis said, Dr. 2017 said I would never walk again. 6 months later. Ooh, I didn't know that. You and I are going to have a conversation one of these days. I want to hear your story, man. Okay, so Travis is pulling for... Okay, so we're talking football. All right, let me go back and make sure that I've handled these questions. You guys throw me some questions. Yes, the ice is clear, Kevin says. Clear ice, let's talk about that. One of the reasons that ponds in the northern section of the United States lose fish, and they call it winter kill, is because sunlight can't penetrate through the ice in order to send its UV rays down so that the living plankton or algae or whatever plants are left can photosynthesize. So oxygen can be consumed much faster than it can be replaced. Now, oxygen only comes from 2 places when it gets in water. It comes from the atmosphere, you know, where the water interacts with the atmosphere to get rid of its gases and absorb gases from the atmosphere, or from photosynthesis from plants. Other than that, under ice where it's dark, whatever's under the ice is going to consume oxygen. So the water starts off with a finite amount of oxygen, and at the pond bottom water interface, bacteria are using oxygen right there, but they consume it so fast that it can't be replaced. It doesn't take long before that's anaerobic. And then what happens beyond that is fish are breathing it, and if plants are respiring 24/7, they're taking up oxygen, producing carbon dioxide. And if that can happen over a period of 80 or 90 days, by the time you get to day 81, 82, 83 with a heavy load of fish and some plants and shallow water, you're going to have a winter kill. So that's why I was asking if the ice was clear, because that opens that pathway for sunlight to come in and give some energy and UV rays to plants to help them produce oxygen for that pond. Okay, let me go down and see people typing. What do we got here? Kenneth is saying, will you start doing this on YouTube Live? I can keep that screen going while scrolling other apps. With Facebook, I'm stuck. Plus a bigger audience. You know, that is one of my complaints about Facebook, is they limit your audience. They want you to pay them to grow your audience. And to me, that's totally against my entrepreneurial principles. I don't like that at all. You know what, Kenneth? I want to figure out what I can do where I don't have any chance of losing the content. I don't want to get 5 years down the road and some social media says, well, we sold out, now we're going to pay you to host, or you're going to pay us to host your stuff, and then 5 years worth of stuff is gone. So I have Leanne, she archives it, she posts it to YouTube. So I'm going to have some time in the next few days. I'm going to look at that a little bit more because I don't know what I don't know, and I don't know enough about social media. I know this. I can do it on Facebook. It's not hard to do. It's easy to do. I can do it on my phone. But I do want to come up with something else. I do want some podcasts. And one of the things I think that makes this work is I can see that you're watching it and I can say something to you. I can acknowledge your ear. I think you like that, and I know I like that. But if I can record some videos, then the way I would do that is I would have a guest or not, but then I would pick a topic, and that's what I'd talk about. So I know there's a lot of guys that have told me before, hey, I love your Facebook stuff, but I'd really like for you to get to the point and talk about that point. It's a little distracting. So there's folks out there that really want content. Then there's others that want the interaction. So Facebook Live is perfect for the interaction. I think I got to learn about YouTube, and I know that the podcasts I'm thinking about, those would be content driven with the hopes of monetizing that through advertising at some point. I'm going to try to charge anybody to watch it. I don't think that's right, but I wouldn't mind being paid a few dollars off of some of these social media giants that can stick advertisements on there, and you click on it and somebody sends a check. Okay, what's the risk of bringing bluegill from Ron's pond to mine? Healthy fish? Twofold question, I guess. Well, I'll tell you this. I asked Ron about how many fish he's pulled out of there that had that affliction recently, and he said he didn't see any of it 2 weeks ago, and he pulled out 12 of them recently. So what I know about bacterial infections is they tend to be fleeting. So they come and they go. And they typically come, like I said earlier, because there's some stressor that initiates it, but then they heal up from it. Or they don't, then they die. The ones that are going to die, they're going to die. But the odds are that there's some fraction of the fish in any given pond that has this condition that have that disease and the others don't. Not all his fish come to the feeder. And when they come to the feeder, they pound each other. I've watched them. I've seen his videos. I've been there and watched those fish. It's like a frenzy. It's like, bam, the feed hits, and then they just kill each other. And it could be that those fish that have that bacterial infection have been bruised by other fish banging into them, chasing fish food. That could be part of the deal. So here's the bottom line answer. Not all the fish in any given pond that has an affliction are going to be sick. Those that are sick are going to be sick. It's like right now, how many people have COVID? It ebbs and flows. So it's parallel. I don't want to make that comparison in a pond. But if you bring some bluegill from Ron's to yours and your water's healthy and they're handled well and they're not stressed from handling, going to your pond, they're going to do fine. As a matter of fact, you could probably take some fish, and I wouldn't do this, but I'm going to tell you what would happen. You could take some fish that have that infection, put them in a new environment where they're not crowded and get rid of whatever the stressor is, and they're going to do just fine. But I did tell Ron today that they're probably crowded, and he said, yeah, I think they are. It's okay to get some out. Now you can go, the way if he wants to seine them, he can do that and then call through them, and take the sick ones, take them out, then move the good ones. But there'll be a fraction of them that are sick, and most of them won't be. Okay. YouTube pays you. Well, Travis, I don't know anything about that a lot, but I do like that a lot. So I got to learn about that. You get us a YouTube channel and a link and we'll share it. YouTube is your best bet. And once you do live with interaction, you can just then throw it up on Spotify, which allows the video to be watched while closing the phone allows audio. Okay. Well, that's how I listen to Joe Rogan, is on Spotify. So, that's good. That's good. One of my hiccups is that most of my days are consumed by things I need to do. but I'm finally getting to the point to where I've got more time than I have to do the things I need to do. So that is one thing I really want to check out, and I'll let you guys know what I learn. And I don't know if I'll get it done in the next few days, but I'm going to figure it out. Okay, James Allen, I love that you guys ask questions I'm not smart enough to ask. Deer can get COVID. I wonder if fish can, if they can pass it to humans. I have no idea if fish can get COVID. I have no idea. I guess if you sneeze on one, maybe so. That's kind of a smart ass answer, but I honestly don't know. The way that it's transmitted through the air, I can't imagine a fish being able to get COVID, but I don't know. I briefly thought about that for about 2 seconds today, hoping that Dr. Marshall, the veterinarian for Pure in the Mills, if she's got the ability and the time to take some of these fish and look at them, I'm going to ask her if she can look for viruses. Okay. I did something. Oh, there it is. There's Dave Weber. Yes, I also like it that I can see now that myself and 46 other people are watching. Now, the cool thing about that with Facebook Live is it says there's 40, like right now there's 49 people watching. Well, I know there's more than that. That's just the ones that we know about. Because I'll get messages and emails from people that were watching it live, and somehow Facebook Live is not letting us know that they're there. I mean, I greet everybody that I see, and then I find out later there was a whole bunch more people that were watching it that I didn't know about. Okay, so I figured Dave Weber would ask a question. Travis, I love Dave's questions. He's always got questions that dig a little bit deeper into the pie of pond management. Danny Mack, it always advertises what I just bought. Isn't that funny how that works? Those dadgum algorithms, they know you. I mean, and I need something else I found out. I was talking to Debbie and telling her some things about Christmas gifts. On her phone, an advertisement popped up. So Siri is listening and picking up on that. Now, I'm not smart enough to know any of this stuff, but I know there's no way that her phone should have known what it was that Debbie and I were talking about. Because when she clicked her phone back up, she said, oh my gosh, you're not going to believe this. Here's an ad for what we were just talking about. Coincidence? I can't see it. I can't see the coincidence. Dion Myers, I stocked 4-inch feed train bass last month. Will they start feeding again in the spring? I'm in Indiana. That's a great big maybe. It depends on how many you stocked. If you stocked them densely enough, then odds are high that some of them will come to the fish food. But what I would do is I'd start off with a small feed, like Aquamax 500. And I'd start feeding that when the water temperature is about 58, 59, 60 through there somewhere. And I would start out by pitching it just a little bit all the way around the pond. And then once some fish start to come to that feed, the rest of them will begin to figure it out. So the thing about stocking 4-inch long feed train largemouth bass, it depends on how many you stock. If you stocked 500, in a 1-acre pond, then they're going to come because the competition and behavior they get conditioned to that environment. Then they get conditioned to your habits. But if you stock 50 in a 1-acre pond, odds are high that they won't come find that fish food. And some of them will, but most of them probably won't. Steve Thorburn, can you talk some about alternative bait fish? I stocked 30 plus creek chubs in 5-acre pond, and I've caught a couple. They've lived 1 year. Hopefully not going to have largemouth. Oh, wait. Okay, can you talk about some alternative bait fish? I stocked 30 plus creek chubs. I love creek chubs. The problem with creek chubs is they're not available commercially. You got to get them out of a creek. And then you got to know which ones you've got because some creek chubs will grow to be 4 pounds. So you want to avoid that. Gold, okay, so they've lived there 1 year, hopefully not going to have largemouth. So in other words, let me read the whole question. Gold diversity, which can be toughened upon. I've stocked fatheads, red shiners, blunt nose, gambusias, and golden shiners. I guess the question I'm going to have, Steve, is to what end? If you don't want largemouth bass, then what are the forage fish going to feed? That would influence my answer about creek chubs. I think creek chubs are a great forage fish for largemouth bass, especially in a lake where you're trying to grow as many big bass as you can. Because those creek chubs, and I presume when you say creek chubs, you're talking about the ones that get to be 10 or 12 inches long and they're shaped like a cigar. Those are perfect largemouth bass food. A bass 2.5 pounds and up can eat the biggest creek chubs that grow in a pond. Now the part of the issues with them is you got to have certain water chemistry and certain water movement in order for those chubs to successfully spawn enough to be significant in that diversified food chain. So I love a diverse food chain. I love to have golden shiners, fathead minnows. Now, if you're going to have any kind of predators in there, then you're probably not going to have fathead minnows last very long. Same thing with the blunt-nosed minnows. They're probably going to disappear. Gambusias won't. They're going to be the ones you see the most because they're going to live around the edges. They're not going to disappear. Red shiners, if they can reproduce well enough, then they're going to survive. Now, red shiners, maybe you might be talking about red horse shiners. If you've got those, they're really more used to spawning in moving water. And if that's the case, and you've got two kinds of fish spawn in moving water, give them some moving water. Buy a circulator from Casco. Set it up around your shallows in the springtime and get some water circulating. If you do that, you're going to stand higher chances of having fish that reproduce, that need that moving water like that. So, talking about alternative bait fish. One of the things about bait fish that I think is important that people don't necessarily think about is how to be sure that you fill each niche. And that niche needs to be filled based on the predator base. So if your predator base is going to be hybrid stripers and smallmouth bass, you need a different diversity of different species of bait fish than if you had largemouth bass, for example, or rainbow trout, or whatever your predator fish is going to be. So, for example, if you're going to try to grow giant largemouth bass, then you need to have, at some point, gizzard shad will be a part of the deal. They're bottom feeders. Threadfin shad feed the 10 to 14-inch bass. They live in open water niche. Bluegill live in the littoral niches, which is the same place bass live. Fathead minnows, they're not going to live very long. They're going to get eaten. Golden shiners, they're always on the move. They're notorious nest raiders. They move in schools of like-sized fish. They spawn on grassy substrates. So do gizzard shad and so do threadfin shad. They spawn around the edges. Threadfin shad will spawn 30 minutes before dark before dawn, and then to just about an hour after the sun comes up when they're spawning. So I do like to have diversity. The thing is, the more diverse you get, if you have overlap in the niches, then some of those species are going to outcompete the others. Like bluegill and red ear, for example. If you've got a pond that's loaded with bushy pondweed, your red ear are going to thrive. And they're going to do just as well as the bluegills, but if you don't have any vegetation that grows snails and crustaceans and insects, your red ear aren't going to do well. They're not going to compete well with the bluegills. So there you go. Okay, so here we go. All right, here we go. What is too high? Harrison Davis, here comes a good question. I see it coming. What is too high of an outflow rate where you think it wouldn't be worth it to lime a pond? A pond I look after is always at full pool, and there's always water flowing out, even with no recent rain. I actually had a talk today with Dr. Wes Neal at Mississippi State. He asked me the same question. He had a guy call him that's got a 270-acre lake. His consultant told him that his flow rate was too high to be able to successfully lime it or fertilize it. And so as Dr. Neal was kind of drilling down and trying to quantify what the flow rate was, the landowner says, well, in the summertime, it really doesn't flow any. So, Harrison, to answer your question, if a lake has got a fairly high flow rate, if you can put a bottom water release pipe in there to where only the bottom water leaves, then the flow rate is less relevant. But if you can't, I'm going to tell you, as long as that volume of water in that lake is not replaced in less than about 2 months, then you can at least initiate a plankton bloom if the alkalinity is high enough, and then you can perpetuate that bloom because you're going to have to come in every couple of weeks and add just a little bit more fertilizer to keep that bloom going. So that flow rate is going to be somewhere like in a 100-acre lake, somewhere to the tune of less than 1,500 gallons a minute flow rate. And if you can take it off the bottom, then you can even bump that flow rate up just a little bit. Christopher Aguilar, do you need to add new fish DNA for every species every few years? No, you don't have to do that, but I think it's a good idea to do it about every third year. So, the DNA that, one of the misconceptions about DNA is that when fish begin to breed, even inbred or even breeding outside their species sometimes, that the DNA pool is going to deteriorate. That's not always true. For example, as long as there's a certain percentage of Florida bass, let's say Florida bass and northern bass, and the Floridas cross with the northerns, and that happens for 15 years, then the Florida gene is going to decline, as is the pure northern genes. But that doesn't mean the propensity for those fish is going to decline. Now, I'm going to defend that a little bit because some people are saying, that can't be right. Well, I'm going to tell you, here's what I'm going to tell you. It's when you have that first generation cross, whether it's an integrator or not, that's going to be the fish with the best odds of a higher percentage of those fish growing larger. But I'm going to tell you this. If we were to take 1,000 fish of any cohort, of any single spawn, let's do it that way, and put those into your lake, 30% of those fish would have everything it takes to grow larger than most of the other fish that are in there. But if we take that same 1,000 and put them over here in my lake, the same percentage, but it's going to be different fish within that 1,000. So the way nature works is some of those fish are going to have what it takes to grow large. It's if they get the opportunity. They don't get eaten. They have all the food they need every day of their lives. Water quality stays good. They have happy water. They can keep growing and thriving. They're not stressed out. But the direct answer to that question is, I think it does no harm and can be wise to bump up the genetics about every 3 years or so. If you want to add more Florida bass every 3 years, or more copper-nosed bluegill, or some new red ear, or whatever, then you can sure do that. You sure can. Steve says the weasel family is susceptible to the COVIDs. Is that where they came up with the song, Pop Goes the Weasel? Okay. Ron says, I gave Chris a nice feeder, 7 wood duck boxes, smoked boudin, and now he wants my sick fish. That's good. Okay, Harrison Davis, I've witnessed that too, Mr. Yep, okay. Let's talk diffusers again. Still don't understand what its purpose is. Do they balance the temperature in summer and eliminate the thermocline? Why bring the caustic gases into the oxygenated upper water? Do they put oxygen into the water? Why run them in the winter? All right, I'm going to go over time tonight. I can see it coming. So you guys look up Mr. Thompson. He's an amazing guy. He's in his mid-80s. He usually teaches a recovery class on Wednesday, so he can't join us live. He goes on motorcycle rides. He's an active angler. He's highly active in his church. And I just want to take a nap thinking about all the stuff that he does in his 80s. I'm fascinated. Here's your answers. What bottom diffusers do is they allow high volumes of low pressure air to be put into the water to create a bubble plume that cascades up from the bottom of the pond, and it acts like a mushroom. It takes that bottom water and allows it to communicate with the atmosphere. So when that water hits the atmosphere, it can relieve its gases and absorb and releases gases like hydrogen sulfide, carbon dioxide, whatever it needs to get rid of. And then it absorbs gases from the atmosphere to help oxygenate the water top to bottom. Now, when you're running it 24/7 in the summer, it absolutely does affect the temperature of a pond. That's why I tell people, and something else I think is very important about aeration. I think having a thermal refuge for fish is real important. So what I do is I have people, when they set their diffusers, keep them out of the deepest part of the pond. I don't care if there's a thermocline in water below 20 feet, for example. That's fine, because that gives our fish the opportunity to go find a cool spot. Temperature is way more important than oxygen to a fish, especially largemouth bass, which is what most people are talking about. So what the bubble plume does is when you've got that aeration system running full time in the spring, for example, Ari, what goes on is it doesn't puke up a whole bunch of bad gas at one time. It's taking it out as it happens. So it's a minor amount. But if you try to turn on an aeration system in July, you better turn it on in stages, because it's going to be upchucking so much junky, dirty, nasty water full of toxic gases that you're going to kill the entire lake. And somebody does that every year. So the way you use that system is important as well. I like to turn it on from 9 o'clock at night till 9 in the morning in the summertime. You don't need to run it in the wintertime when the water temperature gets below about 50. Water's affinity for oxygen goes up as the temperature goes down. And so by that time, if you've run that system throughout the spring, on a timer in the summer, in the fall, you've got that water as healthy as you're going to get it. So I think turning that aeration system off is wise. Now, some people in northern tier states want to pull the diffusers up closer to shallow water, say 4 feet deep or less, so they can open up a hole along the edge of the pond so they can keep that from freezing and minimize the risk of winter kill. The problem with running a diffuser system in wintertime, if you leave it deep, now you're chilling your water all the way to the bottom. And as it is, as long as you've got ice cover, the water in the deepest part of the pond is going to be 40 degrees. If you've got that aeration system going on in Minnesota and there's a hole in that ice, you can bet your butt that water's going to be 32.1 degrees down there. That's too cold even for trout. So there's my spin on aeration like that. Okay, so Danny Mac, I've had similar experiences. Ads on, Dave Weber, let's see. Let me go here. Let me see. Getting ready to add some channel catfish spawning cubes in a couple of ponds. What water depth and does direction of orientation matter? Yes. If you're going to put spawning tubes for channel catfish, be prepared for heavy reproduction. You're going to have to deal with it. Put them in water 3 to 4 feet deep. Have them all closed in except for one end. Think an old-timey cream can. That's what all the fish farmers used to use. Now they've got special clay jugs that they use. I don't know what your receptacle is, but it needs to have enough of a mouth on it that the newly hatched eggs can't tumble out. You want it facing the south for photo period. Politicians beware, Frank says. Josiah, what are your thoughts on putting walleye into small Missouri ponds, 1 acre or less? You know what? Walleye are just like any other top-end predator. The walleye don't like hot water. They like depth. They like rocky drop cliffs. They like rocky outcroppings. They come feed in shallow water. They'll do fine in small ponds. You just can't have very many of them. 20 of them in a 1 acre pond is a lot. How many hybrid striped bass should be put per acre? Depends on your harvest plan. You can probably put 100 to 150 per acre of hybrid stripers because you can feed them, but you better start culling them once they hit about 2.5, 3 pounds. Let's see here. We got more stuff. Are there any negatives to adding crawfish providing you get the native species? No, there's no negatives at all. The only negatives they may not establish, and if that's the case, you got to add them every year. We're getting fish rising on cold, still days. Water's about 48. Are these likely to be shad, not game fish? At 48 degrees, yeah, it's probably going to be shad because the water temperature might rise 2 degrees in the afternoon. And if that temperature rises and it's warmer at the surface than it is below, threadfin shad will come to the surface. Josiah, is there any feed that doesn't have grain in it? No, I wish there was, but there's not, because the grain is what holds it together to make a pellet. If they didn't have to use grain or something with starch in it to hold those pellets together, they do it, but they have to add some carbohydrates to hold it. Steve, walleye, smallies, yellow perch, gills, red ears, eventually black crappie have creek and flow. Okay. Yeah, then I think it's wise for you to diversify your food chain as much as you can. And wipers, got it. I just like green carp. Yep, a lot of guys in the northern tier do. Tory Rhodes, first year I'm keeping threadfin shad overwintering in aquaculture tanks. 6 tanks at 650 shad each, lost 200 the first week. Haven't lost any. The reason they die is because of the way they were handled in the first place. You're going to have to feed them a little bit and make sure that they have a little bit of a current so they can keep swimming. If they don't swim, then they're going to fall. If they don't get fed well, they're going to starve. I would keep that temperature in the low 60s to minimize their metabolism. You didn't ask me for that, but I'm going to tell you that. Wyatt says, just finished a great week in Abilene. The drawdown has been significant. Is there something I should be doing or concerned about while the pond is low? Typically when the pond is low like that, you do the repairs deep in shallow water. But in your case, I don't know how you do that without tearing things up. The good news is while you're in a drought and the water's down, your aquatic plants are going to be cut back with frigid temperatures. What water temperature should we start aeration this spring? Start it at 55 degrees. If you wait till it's in the 60s, if you wait till late April, early May, odds are high you're going to have a thermocline. Then you need to go through that startup process. That's why I use a windmill for airing my pond, says Kevin. Okay. Will you be charging us regular pay and a half for this overtime? Yes. Time and a half. Overtime. And here we are. So, all right. What a great hour. That happened really, really fast. And once again, I always appreciate all you guys chiming in and hanging out. It's just, it energizes me. And I hope that that you get the bang for the buck, so to speak. And I'm still fascinated that people are sitting here and watch a 66-year-old fish guy with a gray in his face talk about fish. And I'm honored that you guys do that. Hey, $35. If you haven't subscribed yet, let's get her done. Let's get her done. All right, folks. Hey, I'm going to call it a day. Call my wife back. She's called me 3 times during this broadcast to tell me that she's arrived safely. So now I'm going to call her and say, hey, honey, it's Wednesday. I'm glad you made it. So, love to you guys, and I don't know where I'll be next Wednesday, but I'm sure it's going to be hanging out with you guys. So until then, adios.